Hey, that was the ending.
The end?
That was the ending.
The beginning of the end.
Yeah.
That's all I've got.
You mean the great intro I didn't have?
That's all that was there.
Guess you get what you paid for.
I'm trying to think. I spent all that time making a new intro. Oh, okay. Oh, well. My sisters and brothers told me they don't want me using like family photos or anything as an intro. It was a nice intro, you know.
So tell me about the guest that's coming on.
I'll let him tell you. He just found out he was supposed to be on.
A lot younger than I thought.
Yes.
Are you old enough to vote?
Barely. Hi, great China.
Nice to meet you.
Ross, good to see you.
China-with. That's how you say it. Okay.
Oh.
Mr. Hopwood, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. I just found out the glorious introduction I had. I forgot to put him on the stand.
It's a bad omen.
So we did have a glorious view of the old west side of Manchester.
I was wondering what that
fantastic.
was.
Well, there's some beautiful new photography. I don't know if you've seen some of the photography that, some of the drone footage of the mill yard.
Drone footage.
Oh, it is beautiful.
Why don't we have Gray? You want to introduce Gray? I have him introduce himself.
I'll let you take over.
I'm fortunate, Gray. I know your name, but I know you're running for executive council.
Executive council. That is
should've-
right.
You should have seen when
I
Glenn
know
RJ figured out
you're
who
an
he was.
IT professional here in Manchester. What?
I've done a lot of different things in Manchester, but a few of the things that I'm most proud were helping to scale Dine. So I joined Dine when we were 15 people, and we scaled to 450 or 500, around 500. And then I went from there and joined Silvertech, which is another fabulous tech company in the city.
What's Silvertech? I know Dine, and I've heard Silvertech.
Yeah.
And Dine was bought by Oracle, but what is Silvertech?
They make silver jewelry.
No, not
sure.
true. Silvertech is actually a fabulous and a great organization. And actually, both of them go back. So I met Jeremy, who was the founder at Dine, and Nick, who was the founder at Silvertech. And have you guys ever heard of Leadership Greater Manchester? The program
Yes.
that's run by the Chamber, and you go around and you spend one day for every month exploring a different part of the city. And so I like to say that that was the best investment I've ever made. Jeremy was my boss for 9 years. Nick was my boss for another 2. And I met them both in the back of the bus. Actually, the first day when Sil Dupuis was we went on a school bus. The first day is Manchester History Day, and you go down on a school bus, and Sil Dupuis takes you around the whole city, showing you everywhere, all the points that Sil likes on the west side. So that's where I met those two. But Nick was a great guy, founded Silvertech here in Manchester, oh boy, 1996 maybe. And what they started out doing is they were one of the first people to design websites. And
really?
Yeah, so they were one of the first people to design websites.
I thought that was Al Gore.
Yeah, no, he is the internet.
The internet.
Yeah, that was the interwebs.
Hey, push down a little. Pretend I'm Rich Gerard and we'll get together a little bit.
Rich Gerard is,
You gotta go over
is
this
a
way.
good human being.
Well, that's for another show. See, I gotta squeeze over here.
But so Gray,
Yeah.
you're nice. You seem like a
Oh,
nice
now
person.
we look really.
Now I look like a midget.
Honey,
Um,
I have to do this to hide my Bob back.
so this is, a big. So you're running in for Executive Council District 4.
Yes.
Again,
That is a huge, big shoes to Chris Pappas, who's
Absolutely.
very well known and well liked.
I like to
He's
say
running
his feet don't look big, but he has giant shoes to fill.
So that's a huge. I've been a state rep. I'm on the school board. That's a huge jump, a huge leap into political life. I'm assuming you haven't held office before, run office before.
No, and honestly, the reason that I'm doing it is because I feel like my business experience is what has kind of prepared me for the position. I have had people in the past say, hey, you should run for state rep or alderman or state senate. And I always felt like, well, two things. One, I think to do those jobs, you have to have a different type of job that I had because, my job is, the one I have work with Dean Kamen right now. It does
at Army.
At Army, yeah, the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute with Dean in the mill yard, and those jobs don't lend themselves well to the legislative cycle, right? And so, for me, when I, Joyce said, hey, you know what, Chris is running for Congress, you should think about this. And Chris said, hey,
Joyce Craig.
Yeah, Joyce Craig, yeah. And
you're a big supporter of Joyce.
Have always been a big supporter of Joyce's. I think she's doing incredibly hard work for the city.
Oh, yeah.
And I was excited. I actually wrote her a check before the cycle. I think it was the cycle before she ran. I just said, hey, I'm just going to give you this check and know that there's people out there that want you to do this.
But
Now,
for Joyce, I think, to talk to you about that, it's because the necessity. I see this, and maybe I was trying
is
to.
it true that Joyce has a restraining order against you?
Why would she have that? He's the only guy that can really pull my chain without me, going to full PTSD mode.
But to finish the response on the question, Chris Pappas, when I chatted with Chris about it, he believed that business experience is very helpful on the council, and
yeah.
I've always thought that whether it was a diner at Silvertech or at Army, or helping with found a local community bank, or starting the state's largest seed capital fund, those types of experiences are really around hiring people, right, and striking good business deals, which is fundamentally, as I understand it, the role of the executive council. You're really trying to suss out business, what the business deal is that the state's getting itself into, and also what the qualifications, how the person's going to do at the job that you're voting to have them take for the state.
See, that's why I thought it was interesting that Joyce would talk to you, because everybody wants to grow Manchester. I was in the Silicon Valley for so long, and there's so much potential here, but it's not. Maybe the quickening's happening, but something has to be done. And the executive council seems it's different than a senate or a state
Very
rep or
different.
that.
It's like a vice. It's like a lieutenant governor. It's a holdover from colonial times when we didn't trust the governor. So New Hampshire has a weak
But for
governor,
spending money.
and so you have the 5 executive councils. You need a
Yep.
majority of them to agree with. The governor can do certain things on his own, or her own, like
Yep.
veto legislation.
Yep.
Nominate judges, although you have to approve the judge. You have
Yep.
to approve contracts over what, $10,000?
I think it's 25.
It's bumped up. So our governor, essentially, 2-year governor, is a weak position, relatively
So-
compared to other governors.
Yeah.
And they need the council's approval.
Yeah, and the interesting part about it was a story I heard. I had a great lunch with Jim Normand. I don't know if you know Jim, but
Oh, yeah.
he was executive counselor in the 90s. And interesting, some of his work on the 10-year highway plan is still bearing fruit today in terms of what he was supporting. But he talked about it in 2 ways. And the first way I'd heard of before, which is that and because some people say, why do we have an executive council? And so I was asking, he served on it, so he should know. And he said, well, it goes back to colonial times, and the big king in England had appointed this governor here, and didn't want that governor thinking that he was a little king, right? The big king, and the colonists were happy to oblige, because if the colonists they didn't like one king, let alone 2 kings, right? But the thing that I didn't know, which was the other part of the story that he told me, was that in addition to distributing the power, the merchants at the time in Portsmouth, they weren't super confident that the royal appointee
Right.
was going to know how to strike a good business deal, or on the other side, know how to hire someone well. They were landed, right? They didn't have to do the thing that merchants do, which is strike deals and hire people.
Right.
And so they said, yeah, we think this makes a lot of sense, not only to make sure we don't get 2 kings, let alone 1, but also to make sure that we keep an eye on the contracts, the deals that the state is striking, and on who's getting hired. And fast forward, all these many years later, and if you have to ask me if I like kings, I still don't like kings. And if you have to ask me if I thought that I was concerned that people in politics might not have the experience to drive the best bargains, or might have the experience to make great hiring decisions, I think those are still true. And I believe that my experience in business, I don't think I know everything, but I think I can help the state make better decisions.
And what can, but once again, going back to the discussion here with Joyce, it makes sense about how do we, like Dean Kamen is often talked about, how, number one, how do we keep the young people here when you have Boston 55 miles away, which The Economist, the British news magazine, says is the 7th most economically dynamic country in the world. Boston.
Yep.
And to keep them from going down there. And how can you get the people already in Boston to come up here?
Well, that's exactly. So when I showed back up in Manchester after getting out of law school, it was the loneliest birthday that I ever had, June 29th, 2004, because while I grew up in Canterbury, so I was local, none of my friends moved back. I didn't have a single friend in town, and I thought to myself at the time, I don't know, you're young. I don't know how this is supposed to work, but a state where no one comes back to, that can't really work. How are there people here if no one comes back?
In a way, you see.
What's your education background?
So I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad in political science.
Okay.
UC Berkeley out at the UC system in California. Cal, yep. And then I went to Duke, where I got a law degree and a public policy degree.
Excellent.
Yeah, you're the type of people that we lose, right? And that we don't usually get back.
Public policy, is that like an MPA, public administration? Is it more
MPP.
Yeah,
Master's
the
in
dual
Public-
degree.
But is it similar to an MPA?
To be honest, I don't know exactly what what's part of an MPA, but what I did was I took courses on statistics, economics, organizational structures, leadership, and I think certainly that both of those things actually were tremendously helpful in business, right? And tremendously helpful in helping Dine as we scaled, because
Dine was a great success when I got here. Because I worked in Foster City, and there was Oracle.
There's Oracle.
Right there in Redwood City, but it had the buildings. So.
Yep.
And we always heard stories about Larry Ellison. He only had $8 billion.
I know. And they were just, that's why people were asking me whether or not I was sad about, because we spent a lot of effort trying to get that Dine sign up there, which was the same script.
Right.
And you know the story about that being the script of.
It's one of the factors.
The same script of the woman that owned the facility, and she wrote out Pandora. That was actually mimicked. The Pandora sign was mimicked on her script, right? And so we had her actually write, just before she passed, we had her write out Dine, and we formed that on. So I loved that sign, and I loved what it said about the fact that the mill yard was resurgent. But what I like even better about the Oracle sign is, some people knew Dine. It was a local name. But when there's millions of people a year that drive up 293, and what that sign says about Manchester is incredibly important. It says, this is where, technology companies exist. It's a giant, stake in the ground, flag in the ground that says, if you want to build a career, this is a great place to do it. And I think that's what's so important about convincing young people to stay here, to come back, is that they've got career opportunities. One of the challenges that New Hampshire faces, unlike Boston, unlike San Francisco, unlike North Carolina, is that in New Hampshire, all the businesses, most of the large businesses, and a lot of the economy is basically in that southern triangle between Nashua, Salem, and Manchester.
Yes.
Right? Now, where are all the universities?
Boston?
Nowhere in New Hampshire, nowhere near that.
Right.
They're in
Dartmouth,
Durham, they're in
UNH.
Plymouth, they're in Dartmouth, they're in Keene. It's like there's a ring. And so who can blame the students if what they think New Hampshire is mostly fields and cows, right? But that's why we were so focused on, when we started NYPN, right? I was one of the founders of NYPN, which then went on to...
So what is NYPN?
So NYPN is the first, largest, most active Manchester Young Professionals Group. It's a group designed, to basically, I founded it because I wanted to try and help people like me who maybe they didn't even have family, maybe they weren't even from here, but we wanted to welcome them, make them feel connected. Because if you're connected to a community, then you'll be more likely to stay in the economy. And so,
you want to be with people that have similar interests.
Yeah.
And
So let me ask you a question, just out of my own
course,
personal
yeah.
curiosity. So I went to law school with Garth Corriveau,
oh, great.
a friend of mine, great guy.
Great guy.
I heard that Garth was also running for executive council. Is that still correct, or is he dropped out of the race, or?
No, so so I think there was one candidate that did drop out. There were actually 3 candidates running.
Okay.
So there was a candidate, Ted Combs from Londonderry, who's a
Don't know him.
city councilor from Londonderry, and he in a move of great wisdom, I think he decided that he was going to drop out and support my candidacy. So there were 3 of us, and there were 2 of us. And then, Garth, as far as I know, is running. I've seen him. I saw him last night. At a political event. So I don't think. I mean, I'll tell you, he is a man of great courage and fortitude. Because I'm not sure my wife would let me run if I was just about to have a baby. But
He's having another kid?
yeah, having another
Wow,
kid.
you know?
He has
Yeah,
2
this
right
is-
now.
Yeah, it's 2, and they'll be having a 3rd.
Great guy.
And completely committed.
Won't come on my show.
Well, he doesn't want to ruin his
Yeah, he's
political
a bit
career.
of, yeah,
Gray's
courage
throwing,
and wisdom.
they're throwing the dice, but
Well, it's so far it doesn't seem to have gone so poorly.
But,
so
but
I
here's
don't
the
know.
reason why I asked the question is because usually when I'm a Republican, and I'll be honest with you, you seem like a great
Nobody's
guy.
perfect.
Yeah, I know. I'm very friendly with Ted Gatzis, but I wish you well. But usually when I think of the Democratic Party, at least in New Hampshire, is very organized, efficient, and well run. And they usually, what we see is they clear the decks. And for the big races like this, is usually one candidate. I'm surprised that. Do you know who's
You
supporting
surprised
Garth?
that there's democracy?
No, but usually the Republican Party is like herding
Aren't there a
cats.
couple candidates?
Well,
There's a
there's
couple
Jim
can-
Adams is running.
Who's the? Because I think
Republicans.
Jane Cormier is also running.
Jane Cormier's running. She was
on
on
the
that
Republican
show.
side,
Yeah.
but no. But usually the Democrats are very good about. I mean, who? No, do you know who's supporting Garth?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's. We'll see who matters, who supports who. I think what matters is on election day.
Oh, yeah.
And so what I've been very focused on is not on Garth. My focus is on saying, hey, listen, if people think that someone with business experience, especially in technology experience, can help the state make better decisions, then then they should think about considering me as a choice.
You're a non-politician.
No, yeah.
Maybe that's what's unique. Where Republicans, you occasionally, well, we won't mention the one in the White House.
Who's a non-politician?
Somebody will come. It's not unusual for Republicans to see somebody, like a businessman like yourself, who he's probably wondering, why aren't you one of us?
Well, no. But
Why are you a
typically,
Republican with that
although,
resume? Yeah,
and
they
to play
go-
devil's advocate, if you look at the replacement for Congresswoman Carol Shea Porter, there's what, like 12 Democrats running or something?
9 or 10.
But usually, I've been in Manchester now, in New Hampshire for 21 years. Usually the Democrats do a very good job of organizing, races and
What do you mean by organizing?
they usually
Boxing somebody
talk,
out?
Well, they usually talk to people, and they usually there's only very few, one or only a few candidates for each race. Oh, you know that. You've run for office.
Yeah.
All I'd say is that, I don't think that people need to ask anyone to run for office. I think if you feel like you can serve, then that's enough. And I've been really excited to go out and talk to people.
Yeah, it is fun, isn't it?
I my favorite thing is so growing up, my dad, who was a state rep and then served on the school board out of Canterbury, I used to love going in because I got half my toys from the dump. Right, the junk shed. There's the swap sheds in Canterbury.
That's right.
And so I used to love going. And one of my favorite things so far about this campaign, and what I know that I'll be happy doing this summer, is going to the transfer station tour.
We
right?
know each other from the
Oh,
dumps.
yeah. I ran for state senate the last election cycle.
Yeah.
And it was wards 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in Manchester, which I walked the whole. So I started as soon as the election, as soon as the sign up. So I just started walking. It was brutal, but Litchfield, you really can't walk Litchfield. So I would go to the dump every Saturday and hold my side, meet people at the dump. Now,
And he met me at the dump.
yeah,
That
I
guy
thought
was holding the sign for Donna Sousa.
Yeah, I thought he was supporting me, and then I show up and he's supporting my opponent.
What Canterbury's to your family, Litchfield's to mine.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I loved growing up in Canterbury, and so I was at Bedford and met a bunch of friends who were there, because there's a lot of folks from the business community in Manchester that live in Bedford, and in a couple weeks I'm going to be up in Deerfield, going up there, and then I got a friend who's actually, I didn't know that I think it's Barnstead, Allenstown, Chichester, and Pembroke are all share the same transfer station.
Oh, okay. Convenient.
Yeah. So it's kind of get more efficient at scale.
So just if I could ask you another question,
sure.
just for my own. So I've run local races, and I kind of like going door to door, but I'm assuming, as I recall,
It's
You're
huge
the
district.
district
19 towns.
No, okay, I was going to say 20. I thought it was 20. So
375,000 people.
you really
1/5 of
can't.
the state. So.
You really can't go to door in many. So I assume usually you go to the transfer station and meet people that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold. One, these races unfortunately are expensive, right? And so you've got to raise the money to be able to get your message out with, through mail and through digital, and then I think for me, you got to go where the people are. So to me, it's funny. If you ask me about things that sound like fun, if I got to go all summer, basically touring New Hampshire, going to every Old Home Day and all the parades, and then get to check out the transfer station and swap a toy for one of my boys. That sounds pretty good to me. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And then I used to go to
You need one of these though, right, Ross? When you're running a campaign, you think you're going to lose weight. Because you're always busy.
Yes.
But there's always goodies and snacks. And
I know.
Ice cream.
I lost weight.
I know.
I didn't have any of that. I just walked the board.
I will tell you so far the Auburn Democrats. I was there at an event in Auburn. They had fantastic artichoke dip. So Jackie Wood had some fantastic artichoke dip. The brownies in Barrington were delicious.
You're all the way to Barrington?
Oh yeah,
that's part of the.
Yeah, Lee in Barrington. The cookies in Loudon.
It's huge.
Wow,
That is
and
huge.
Loudon?
Cookies in Loudon were good.
They're all so different.
The blueberry coffee cake in Bedford was good.
Oh,
The
Bedford's
Chinese food
good.
at Chenging Li.
I'll agree with you there.
See, Republicans and Democrats can agree, right?
Well, my wife's a Democrat.
There you go. So, that doesn't mean you agree.
Yeah, we don't.
So I've been eating my way through the district, having a great time, and and I think it's a fun way to meet people, right? And I care so
love
deeply
that.
for the community,
I
and
love
and so far it's been a lot of fun.
I like campaign. I don't like losing. That's
losing.
Yeah, losing
Let's not get
sucks.
into that.
Well, and that to me is the whole point. I mean, I think I wanted to do this because for me, if if the worst thing that happens is I get to have a bunch of conversations with voters, and I get to visit a bunch of the state, that seems like a great way to spend a summer.
But getting back to Ross, where he's
Wait, hold on for a
Republican,
second.
he's flabbergasted that a real, honest-to-God businessman is running as a
No,
Democrat.
Gray seems like a great guy. Although this is kind of a silly question, but your last name's Chenoweth, right?
Yep, like with China, but the other way around.
Chenoweth. Because there was a very attractive actress named Chenoweth. You related to her?
Well, Kristen Chenoweth, the
Blonde
singer.
hair. She was in some movies a few years back.
Unfortunately, I don't think I am related to her. Not that I know of, anyway.
Although, for the public, and for the two people that are watching,
13, buddy.
yeah. So as I recall, the sign-ups for public office, and I encourage everybody to run, is June 6th or June 15th.
Yep.
And I believe you're running this year, aren't you?
Maybe.
I will buy you a beer and margaritas if you run for office.
He tried to get me to run for mayor. You were going to give me $75.
Really?
Yes.
How much does it cost to sign up?
100. I said I don't have the extra 25. I was going to run on, seceding. Remember the West Side?
Well, you know what? Unfortunately, and I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I abandoned your ship, and I got on the Glenn R.J. Willett People's Mayor bandwagon and funded his campaign.
Well, how much do you finally get? Do you get 80 votes?
No. I paid. I gave him. I think I donated $50 to him.
Do you know that
Do you know Glenn R.J. Willett, the People's Mayor?
Oh, we talked to him on the phone.
We
the
talked
other
to him on the phone. He was busy just finishing up planting some flowers at
Yeah.
City Hall.
Glenn
I think
didn't get
200 he
this
said, right? Or
299.
299. Why he couldn't?
I don't know why it's
one more flower. I
299.
feel like I should have. I'll go over and plant one more flower just to hit the 300.
We might get taxed.
But I strongly encourage you to run.
For what?
State rep.
My thing is writing. Yeah. I remember when I met Bill Cashin, I said, I went over there to, because everybody goes to see Bill Cashin.
Yeah.
He's an alderman when I was
He's
a boy.
forgotten more about politics than most people ever learn.
When I was a boy, he was the alderman. And I told him, writers do not make good politicians. It's true.
It's not
The
true.
only one I can think is Andre Malraux.
No,
and,
Rich Girard. He's an excellent politician, and he's a great writer. And he's a great human
Did he
being.
pay you to try to trigger me?
I like Rich. I like
We call it
Rich.
triggering in PTSD folks. Yes, and we'll talk about him the
Well,
next show.
enough about you. But so great. So I'm assuming you're making the rounds of the media. Where have you been, or what have you been on?
the media.
Well,
Bob
I
Backus.
was lucky enough to be on Bob Backus' show.
Progress reports.
You know, I've been in, you know, several of the columns and that kind of stuff. But, you know, I think for me, it's about getting out and meeting people, and I think you can do that a lot of different ways these days. You know, so I've got a great email list that I'm sending out to from all of my business contacts over the past, you know, since I've showed up in 2014 or 2004. You know, I'm connecting with people on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram.
I was going to assume you had a strong social media presence.
Yep, and then I'm connecting, you know, with people directly, right? Going to town meetings, and you know, excited to just, you know, have conversations, and you know, and that's the most important thing that I think about whenever I go to any of these places, is to start with questions, right? I think to me, too often, people running for office start talking about what they want to talk about.
Right.
And the whole goal of this endeavor is to understand what people care about, and then take that perspective with you when you're representing them. And so I start every conversation trying to learn people's names and trying to understand what they care about, because that way I can make sure that when I'm talking, it's something that's relevant to them, right? And people care about different issues. You know, some people care about transportation, some people care about you know, innovation in government. Some people care about the opioid crisis. Some people care about healthcare. Some people care about, you know, state contracting issues. You know, there's a lot of different issues that people care about, and you know, the great part about it is, you know, it was interesting. I got a question about the state working with contractors, right, as opposed to full-time employees.
Right.
And
That's been an idea that's been discussed. I remember Gerard discussed it with the Gatsis once on one of his shows, but Gatsis, you know, wasn't interested. They just didn't get into it. Or my blood pressure rose. I'm not sure which. But it was something that Gerard was discussing as a way, the budgetary problems, the city, do we go that way?
Well, and what I said is, you know, I think in my experience, you know, in business, sometimes contractors make sense and sometimes full-time employees make sense, right? There's no hard and fast rule about which one works best. If you have a project that you know is going to last 6 months, you know, it doesn't make any sense to bring someone on to work for 6 months full-time. Because what are they, you know, you hire them and then that doesn't make any sense. What if it's a skill set that you don't have that you need to kind of blend into the team? Hey, I want you to come in, I want you to be here for a year, so that my existing team now has a new skill set that they learned from you. Right, so there's times, but there's also times, you know, because I know one of the things you're paying for when you're paying for a consultant is that they have a lot less certainty that they're going to have a job long term, and so they demand a higher rate. So consultants can be much more expensive in the long term than hiring someone and building talent internally. You know, so I think that's the kind of thing where, you know,
One thing
it's
I
just
found,
been my
yeah.
experience.
One thing I found, I went through 3 takeovers, is permanent employees have institutional memory. Sometimes somebody would take over a company and they're just buying something you have, like a set of databases or maybe...
Customer list.
Right. And they don't want the institution, you know, they don't want
Yep.
the institutional memory, which sometimes that could have a disastrous effect. Yeah.
You know, and I think was the big concern I think that
Right.
a lot of people had about when Oracle bought Dyn.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Everybody was talking
And
about it.
and you know what? They're growing leaps and bounds. And
Whether-
that's been a fantastic evidence. You know, I think Kyle York is the CEO. Great Manchester family, the Yorks.
For me, it was amazing because I was just thinking, oh, well, they're just going to buy what Dyn's a
Yeah.
capital, what it has, and then just leave Manchester because, and frankly, this is because what people were talking about. You can't get the employees. We don't have the rail link in that. But yet,
we
it seems
built
to
it
be
to-
Oracle has a commitment here.
Well,
which
they
is
have a commitment,
tremendous.
and I'll tell you, Oracle doesn't have a commitment to Manchester. It has a group of incredibly talented people that happen to live in Manchester. And that's what it's all about. It's all about, you know, can we build a
Building.
workforce,
Build that
the
workforce.
talent here in the city that makes businesses want to locate here.
It's the most critical thing. Ross, 2014, that was the first time I ran for state rep, and a writer from the Wall Street Journal wanted to see people going door to door. She was covering Carol Shea Porter and Frank Ginther were going at it again, and she wanted to go around the neighborhoods. And I was taking her around, and she had all these ideas about Manchester, that there was a rail link, that there was this boom of, so I took her to some place, and, oh, well, you know, you got your, she was as old as I am, yuppies and that. She was rather surprised when I told her there was no rail link here, and that we were having a problem getting employees and retaining the youth. Because to her, this is an ideally placed location next to Boston.
And I think that's one of the reasons. So one of the things I'm proudest with that, we talked about that big, flag planted in the ground that's saying this is part of technology. And the other thing, I'm incredibly excited about the opportunity that Army presents for doing the same thing for biotech. Because right now you've got fantastic software companies in the city, fantastic, world class. And I think what would be very exciting for me is if, instead of having all the biotech companies stop at Waltham or Andover, they come up over the border and they're up here. And you see biotech signs, not just software signs from the river. And the other thing I think that brings with it is great manufacturing jobs. Because, medical manufacturing is still something that happens in the U.S. And if we can get that to happen here, I think it expands that set of opportunities. So if we can get those businesses up here that are not just jobs for 2 and 4 year degree earners or 4 year degree holders, but for everyone, people coming out of high school that can be part of that manufacturing economy. To me, that's very powerful, and that's why I was so excited to get involved with it.
No, so you're a commuter rail supporter?
I think the one thing I definitely support is that we need to take the $4 million from the feds to do the engineering work to determine how much it's going to cost, because to me it just doesn't make any, whether you want it to be a public or a private solution, because there's people that are considering doing rail. I know people that are considering private solutions on rail.
Right.
There's one coming up to Bedford, I believe. There's a private company.
An idea.
So there's an idea of it, right? But the reason they're doing Bedford is because they don't know how much it's going to cost to build to redo the bridge across the Merrimack.
It's expensive. They're trying to avoid.
Yeah, but
that.
how expensive?
I don't know.
No one does.
Nobody
because
does.
we haven't taken the money from the feds to be able to do the engineering work.
But it's my understanding, and I follow this rail somewhat closely, maybe not everything, but it's my understanding that we've studied this repeatedly in the last 15 to 20 years.
It's been completely clear that it's a good idea. So all the studies say that. The difference between an engineering plan, right, and a study is they're not going to study the economics of, hey, is there the demand, right? Even though the bus company says there's demand, and the surveys they say, they do say there's demand. What this does say, well, how much does it cost to build a bridge? And if I'm a private developer, why aren't we looking to try and support private developers who do that for the city and the state? I mean, that's just a no-brainer that you'd support. You'd figure out, because the one thing that a private developer would want to see is how much is it going to cost, right? And that's what you want to see. How much is it going to cost? And to me, that's why it's a no-brainer to take the federal money and figure that out. Well, I don't. To be honest, I have no idea why you would take the position that you wouldn't take the money to figure out the cost of it, because it's such an it could be such a potential economic opportunity for for Manchester, for Bedford, for Nashua, and and I think that's when I talk to businesses, right, which is I think the core of reasons why you'd want to have that, they're clamoring for it. Because they want to understand that they have the best access to talent possible, and they want great highways, right? Absolutely. We want a bus line, absolutely, right? We want rail. Why wouldn't you expand that access point for our connection to the Boston economy? Especially because I think anyone that's trying to do business down there has experienced this before, and I experience it when I'm trying to do business down there. I never schedule a meeting before 10:30, right, if I can help it. And I never schedule a meeting after 1 if I can help it.
Yeah.
Now, you know what that does? It cuts New Hampshire's business opportunity in Massachusetts in half. Instead of having an 8-hour workday, you have a 4-hour workday. Because otherwise, you got to leave at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. to get down there for your 9 o'clock meeting. I have friends who have business in Boston. They go. It's only 45 miles away. They go down and get a hotel room,
Right.
so they can make their morning meeting. You know, and it's not about how wide 93 is getting to the Massachusetts border, right? It's about that steel curtain that drops every morning at 7, right? And then drops again every afternoon at 2:30 or 3.
As- yeah, but somebody.
my question is more important than yours.
No, but it's somebody that's.
They're
It's
both
my
important.
show.
Everyone's question is
I'm gonna
important.
show you
Co-host,
go.
so I'm going to have to talk over you, but
No,
we got to explore
well,
the real issue more in depth.
I'm going to say, as somebody who lived in San Francisco and New York, it's just taking a rail. Your time is it's budgeted. You're there. You can get so much more done on a train.
Well, and you
So
can
much more.
And you can also have a more accurate understanding of your schedule. Which, if
and
you're
you're
if you're going to a business meeting, I mean, I'll tell you, the one thing that kills every deal, as far as I'm concerned, someone shows up late. Right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a very bad way to make an impression.
You can't be late.
And,
put under New York.
and so what that means is that you're very hesitant. If you got to deal with traffic, you're very hesitant. And I think that type of hesitancy in accessing one of the biggest economies, most dynamic economies in the world, is not what we want to do in Massachusetts. Right? We want to have dependable, reliable access to those markets, both talent flowing north, you know, selling stuff going south, and I think those are important things. And why we're dragging our feet on this just doesn't make any sense.
And it is expected by people and professionals. Expected. You expect that type of transportation.
So
Now,
I've
Ross.
thank you. So I've explored this issue, California, New York, and Boston. So when I look at California, I know they're building a commuter, a passenger rail.
Well, so that's
massive.
passenger rail is different
Over-
than commuter
That's
rail.
different, yeah.
So I think those are two. That's a critically important.
Extremely
not-
expensive.
Well, but-
in California.
So two completely different things.
That's a different
Amtrak
thing.
is completely different than the T.
Right.
Okay.
Right, and
Yes.
so- and to me, that's
is public transportation. I think of like the Downeaster.
So that's
so.
but they're run by different things, and so
Yes.
it's like, for instance,
Right.
Caltrain completely different than BART.
Okay. So
Right,
now.
New York subway system completely
But
different.
but the expenses of buying buying and building buying the land, building the rail, buying the trains,
But
you're
this
still
is-
going to have massive costs.
But I think, you know, there's actually, I mean, the rail line's already there.
Yeah.
Right, from here to the rail lines, you don't need to buy land. The rail lines are. I mean, you might want to build train stations, which actually is a great economic opportunity for people that want to pluck a train station down there. But I think for me, the funniest part about that, we can't even get the free money from the federal government to figure out how much it costs. So to me, I don't understand why we would say no to free money. I mean, the one thing I learned in business is that when someone legitimately gives you money for free, it's a good thing to take it. And I don't know why the state doesn't want to take it.
So let's ignore California for a minute. I've been looking also at the New York City subway system and looking at the MBTA, which I used to use all the time when I lived in Boston.
New York City subway is different than like the commuter rail.
Yes. So you're saying that the system that you would like to see be tied into the MBTA?
Yeah, I want it to be commuter rail because it's very different than a down
I don't
east
consider
schedule.
the MBTA, maybe it's my lack of understanding in this, I don't consider the MBTA to be commuter rail. I think that more of a public subway system.
So that's subway, but the same people that run that
Parts
is,
of it are, yeah.
you know, the trains that come in from the west, from the south, you know, the one that runs to Lowell.
South Station.
Right, so they come in from South
That's
Station.
Amtrak, right?
No, well, Amtrak operates in South Station, but you can also get regular local trains.
Okay.
Right, you can get them out from Providence, you can get them out from the
Two
west.
different systems, though. They're not linked into the MBTA system.
You mean like the red line, the green
orange,
line.
green.
Yeah,
Or
so
they
it's
shift
a little.
stations.
Yeah, but the reason why I mentioned New York is, like, if you look at New York right now, their subway system, I believe they are facing a massive infrastructure crisis with the New York subway system, where I believe they need $1 billion just to
But that's
upgrade
subway,
because of
Ross.
just because.
Yeah.
Well, but they're talking about tying into the MBTA.
When I went down to New York
Mass
from Dobbs
Transit with the
Ferry, I
train,
took a
But
train.
we don't want to make everything about you. Gray
But-
is the guest. Let's make this about
We're
Gray.
talking about, I took a train,
so-
and not take the subway from Dobbs Ferry to New York.
So if we look at New York, I believe they're facing $1 billion price tag for their subway system as far as upgrades because of a lack of maintenance. And then if you look at the MBTA, they're facing similar problems. I mean, what do you?
Well, I think that we're facing problems with bridges, right?
Oh,
I mean,
geez,
I mean, you look at the number of red tag bridges in the state. You know, there's a massive transportation infrastructure problem that we have in this country, and I don't care whether it's, you know, airports like JFK, right, or the LaGuardia, which are tough to get in and out of. I don't care if it's bridges that you're driving across. I don't care if it's potholes that we're dealing with in the city, right? I don't care if it's train infrastructure or subway infrastructure. I mean, we've got to figure these systems are critical for the economy to run.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And they all need to be supported in a way that allows us to have an economy that works. Right? And not every bridge is going to get funded. Not every rail project is going to get funded, or not every highway project is going to get funded. But we need to figure out a way to support business. You know, the same way that we got to figure out how to deal with energy costs.
Or you're
Right.
not going to get those workers.
I'll be honest with you, in general, I'm very, very skeptical about rail coming up to Manchester, but because of costs. But I think if my advice to the people who support it is to do it incrementally. I mentioned it to the mayor in a meeting, and she didn't think it was a great idea, but if we already have the MBTA coming up to Lowell,
Yeah.
right up to the border. If rail supporters were going to do this, instead of trying to get everything all at once, if I was a rail supporter, I would say let's bring it up to Nashua. Let's do baby steps. Let's bring it up to Nashua and see how that goes.
Well, you know what I would do? I would hire people who understand the way that this stuff works, see what they say is the right approach. I mean, I'll tell you, I don't do transportation studies for a living. So, you know, one of the things that I talk about, I have three things that I think about when I hire people, right? And three things that I'd bring up to the State House if I were to, you know, get elected and work with commissioners. And the first one is, do you have the experience to succeed in the position, exceed expectations in the position?
Right.
The second one is, do you have the fire in the belly? Because every job is tough, and you got to be committed to it, really committed. And the third one is, are you smart enough to look at the data, but brave enough to make change? Because it's not just about being smart, it's about doing something with that information.
Yeah.
And so for me,
Yeah.
you know, I think unless there's a reason to question the studies, which no one has given any reason to question it.
Actually, I believe there was. You remember the old saying, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail? I believe some of our past rail studies were people who had been in the rail industry. So in their world, and I'm not saying they were misleading, but in at least one of the studies, the person who was a big advocate for rail had worked many years in the rail industry. So
Wouldn't that qualify him to?
it would, but then his solution is going to be, you know, we should go ahead. This is, you know, he's going to be a cheerleader for rail, obviously.
Well, I mean, I think if you say, I go talk to a surgeon about a surgery, right? I mean, I think you do want to have people that have competence in the area. I mean,
Right. You do.
asking someone who flies hot air balloons to talk to me about rail doesn't seem like a very smart idea.
No, but you might want to talk to a general practitioner and say, should I see a surgeon? Because the surgeon, and believe me, I work with doctors all day long, and they're not bad people, but they're if
Doctors
that's
aren't bad people.
And you know what I'll say as well, the study is the study, right? It was done by competent people. Nobody questioned whether or not they should be hired when we use them to work on the study, and I think the real thing for me is just the evidence that I have from business people that I talk to. I literally got an email from a business that wants to move up from Cambridge to Manchester saying, "Do you guys have rail? Because that would really help us with our decision." And
you say no, and then they want to know why.
And I'll tell you, when I went down, personal experience, I went down to recruit students to work at Dine, right, several years ago. Go down to the seaport. We sponsored this event with lots of smart young people, and I say, I get up and talk about Dine. Everyone's very excited, and I say, hey, so who would commute up from Cambridge or Boston to Manchester? It's reverse commute, pretty easy.
Yeah, it is easy. I used to do it. I used to live in Somerville.
And I got about 3 hands out of the 50 people that were there. And I'll tell you, that was really depressing because we had sponsored the event and I was trying to recruit. And then I don't know why I did it, but I've been thinking about it because my wife lived down near New York City and her dad had commuted about an hour from Connecticut into Manhattan to work at a bank.
I lived in Connecticut.
And I said, well, what if there was a railing? What if you could hop on into a station in about an hour and get to Manchester? Like 35 people raised their hand. I mean, I don't. You can tell me that those people didn't raise their hands or didn't believe what they didn't know what they were talking about. But I sat there, I asked the question, and they raised their hands and said they'd be interested. You can tell me that someone doesn't like the study or something like that, but I got the email.
No, I believe you that we would attract people. But here's something to think
And
about.
Manchester would boom.
We would.
Be good for the
But
airport.
here's something
It'd be
to
good
think
for the
about.
airport.
I used to be a state rep,
economy.
and I was on public
Booming
works.
economy, more
And
tax
here's the
dollars.
thing, we have state reps from all over New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Say, look, this is provincial, but this is how a lot of the people in New Hampshire feel.
Yeah.
Say, look, so when we fund these highway projects that are going to help Manchester or a rail project, I live up in you're from Smallton, you're from Canterbury.
From Canterbury.
Say, it's not fair to us. We're not going to be using that rail. We're not going to be using that highway, but you're going to spread the cost around the whole state so that the citizens. And this was very. I had an epiphany. This was my. I never thought about that. I live in Southern New Hampshire. I
Yeah.
kind of think of things that help Southern New Hampshire help the whole state. But the people living up in Central and Northern New Hampshire are like, no, that we're gonna. So you want us through our real estate taxes that go to the state and then are redirected, are going to pay for this thing that we're never going to see any benefit of. So
Well,
basically,
I think the
I'll
same
know
thing goes for the
better.
roads up north, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
we either need to decide that the state needs transportation infrastructure that supports the economy, or it doesn't. And I'm a person that believes we should have roads, we should have bridges, right? And I don't begrudge Portsmouth for having good roads, and I don't begrudge. I don't drive a lot to Keene, but I think we should have a good highway there. And I hope they feel the same way about the roads in Manchester and
Now,
the transportation infrastructure. I mean, we don't have big airports everywhere, but we have a great one here in Manchester, and I think that's good for the economy.
I do too.
And for me, things that we can do that help Manchester, help the places around Manchester, and help if we can. Because I'll tell you, you might have someone commuting up on the train to Manchester, but imagine the person who lives in Canterbury or Loudon, right, or Pittsfield. Now they've got a shot to commute down 45 minutes to get to Manchester for that job. If that company wasn't in Manchester,
Right.
would they have to go all the way to Boston?
They're
And
not
what-
going to.
Well, they might. I know people that commuted from Belmont to Boston, and I'll tell you, it was really hard because they could make good money. I mean, they lost a lot of it in Massachusetts taxes, which is a different thing. But they didn't get a chance to see their kids, to watch soccer games or football games, and I think that we should be growing businesses here in New Hampshire and doing everything that we can to support that business growth.
And businesses pay taxes that benefit the rest of the state. Right, Ross?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And now, in working up a pharmacist, in traveling, so I would work all over, and I'm sure you've seen this. There's, and you're right, we do need a better business climate because in working in Central New Hampshire, Northern New Hampshire, I see so much poverty.
Yeah.
And I'd work at a pharmacy in Southern New Hampshire, and I'd have except in say outside of Manchester, I see very little Medicaid use. It's a lot of people had private insurance, so obviously either their spouse or themselves had a decent job that provided them health insurance. I'd go up to Central New Hampshire, for instance Franklin. I'd go or farther north, and I'd come across these towns, and it would be either cash, they don't have insurance, or the Medicaid population was massive. So I knew these people. What I thought to myself, and I believe is probably correct, is these people don't have jobs, and so that's why they have Medicaid, and so they just don't have the job opportunities the farther north that you go.
Well, and that's why I think we got to make the economy work for the whole state.
A booming
Right.
economy in this state. When Boston booms, the rest of the state booms too.
So a rising tide lifts all the boats,
Right.
as JFK said.
Oh yeah, look at Methuen now, what it was like 30 years ago. Methuen, my niece just sold a house there. She couldn't believe the price she got. These things are booming. and moved to outside of Salem.
You know,
So, because she could get a more economical house. But it was surprising the boom that's going on in Massachusetts. Now, if you don't want Manchester booming, you know, you don't want. Let's not have a rail. Let's not attract young people.
What people are questioning, it's not. That's kind of a straw man argument. It's not that they don't
But
want
it isn't
rail.
a straw
If it was
man.
free, they'd be like, yeah, bring it. I think most
Nothing but
people.
free.
But that's
You're
the
a
problem.
Republican,
People are
nothing's
questioning.
free.
People are concerned about the cost benefit. You know, so we're going to bring up.
Well,
Say
this is the-
5,000
but then
people a
why
day
would
come up
you-
to Manchester,
but
but
then
it's going to
why
cost
would
us
you-
$100 million a year. That's what they're questioning is the
And
cost.
it's going to
But
how
nothing
much-
has ever said it's going to. I mean, what that? I mean, you could also. I mean, it doesn't cost that much money. It just doesn't,
No.
right? And you know, and the thing about it that's so surprising to me, that's just based on the studies. But why won't we accept? This is the part. As a business person, I don't get it.
Right.
Why won't we take $4 million in federal tax dollars that are just sitting there for us to be able to do this engineering work and figure out whether or not maybe it's expensive, maybe it's not, maybe it's maybe it works that it's better for maybe someone's interested as a private developer.
Some people
Why-
don't want
why-
change.
Why
They're afraid of change.
why are we unwilling to do that? And that's the part that I haven't heard for me. You know, I haven't heard a real good argument against taking the free money. It just doesn't, you know, because even if you're using it to allow a private business person to make a more intelligent business decision, wouldn't we want that?
Let me ask you this.
Well,
So
we go.
Whoa, we've got
Ross,
4 minutes. I want to
and I
help
want
rail.
him to.
We've
Ross,
been
this
talking
is
about
my
rail.
show.
So what are some of the things that you'd do differently
Ross,
or
you
that
won't
you'd
be
like to
coming
do?
back.
Up in
Do you have
Concord?
something? Because you can come back anytime you want, and you can prepare your questions. But would you like? We only
I'm
got
happy
about,
to. Yeah,
But we
well,
only got about 3 minutes.
Okay.
Is there
Let him do a
something-
stump speech.
Is there something you'd like to say about? Because we're in the minutia now.
Um,
What will you bring to the executive council?
Yeah.
That
was my point.
okay. That's
Yeah.
not there. What can a businessman like you bring that it's actually flabbergasting Republicans and other people to think
well,
we got you, we Democrats got you.
To be
enough.
honest, one of the things, I mean, it sounds simple, but one of the things that I'd be really interested in doing is trying to introduce technology to kill lines at the DMV. They did a
Wow.
really cool thing where they now have you can find out the wait times about what the wait times are at the DMV. But, even better than knowing how long the wait time is not having to wait. And I don't know if it's that we don't have people that are asking the right questions. I don't know if it's that we have people that don't have a lot of experience with technology and so are worried it's going to cost a lot of money. But I literally just bought a piece of software called Calendly for my job down in the mills. And for $12 a month, anyone on earth can schedule an appointment that could be a varying set duration. So they could schedule a 5-minute appointment, a 7-minute appointment, a 10-minute appointment. They can have buffers in between that. If I can put a 2-minute buffer in between, or a 3 million, or a 2-minute buffer, or a 3-minute buffer, right? And they can go online and they can schedule it. They can cancel it. They can reschedule it. It shuffles them all around to make sure that they fit, and it sends me a text message to remind me that I need to show up. That's for $12 a month. Now, maybe it costs 10 times that. Maybe it costs 100 times that. But are we really leveraging technology to drive efficiency in the state? And I think we could do more. And I think that my business experience in technology is going to allow me to ask some of those questions, and see it. Hopefully I can be helpful. Hopefully some of the things I've done, because I'll tell you, we didn't scale down by spending too much. We scaled down by making smart investments and taking calculated risks. And I think the state needs to act more like that. We need to have those smart investments, and you can make them cheap. Because what you're doing is you're going to free up people to do other stuff. And I think you're going to make the experience of taxpayers and citizens in engaging with government better. And I think, how can we argue about that? That's the best part about the Executive Council, is that it's not about what government we should have. It's about how government should run. And that's what gets me excited. I've spent a career making sure that businesses are tight, efficient, effective, retain happy customers, and I want the state to do the same thing. How can it make its citizens, its taxpayers, its customers happy? Right? How can it be efficient? That to me is what's exciting about the position, and that's why I'm running.
Hey, a different type of Democrat.
Yeah.
Got your tongue tied right now, huh?
Well, you keep on shutting me down. You don't believe in free speech.
Well, you're a Marine. I have to.
But I think, and I think there's a lot of
we only
issues.
got about a minute.
Yeah,
so.
and I think there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of other issues. Some of the stuff, I think a lot of people agree on, and some stuff probably people don't agree with me, right? I mean, I'm sure that I think we should keep politics out of the Planned Parenthood decision. I think that doesn't make any sense I think if we're going to have who we should contract with, that's a decision for the state legislature, for the Senate or the House. I don't think that we should get in politics.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Politics out of
minute.
Planned Parenthood, but Planned Parenthood makes large donations to political parties.
The reason that so when I look at a contract, I'm
Gotta
not gonna,
wrap it up. You're welcome back.
well, thank you very
and
much.
You can come. I know not to have you on when Al Montoya is here from the VA because you'll talk his ear off. But come back and you
Well,
and
thanks for the
Ross
time.
and-
It was great. It was
Good
great
to
to
have
chat.
Ross on, too.
And the last thing I'll say is that, while I might be a Democrat, I think that the best thing I learned in business was how to have a productive conversation with people that don't always agree with me. And that's the kind of thing I want to do in Concord. I'm not going to agree with everyone all the time, and that shouldn't stop us from finding solutions for the state.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gray. Thank you, Ross. Don't give
Thank
me
you.
that look.
Thank you, John.
And
I'll still
thank
buy you a beer.
See you next week.